And welcome back to Washington Commanders Insider. Today we're talking about the key takeaways from OTAs. And so before we jump into it, I first want to remind you to hit that subscribe button, just like Jaden Daniels is going to be hitting Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel, and many others for multiple touchdowns this upcoming season. And so in exchange for hitting that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Washington Commanders. And so make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Washington Commanders Insider family as we talk nothing but Washington Commanders football. And so with that being said, let's jump into it. We're looking at the key takeaways from OTAs. And so I wanted to start with Coach Joe Whitt Jr. And I must say, listening to him, super excited for this defense this upcoming season. And so paraphrasing everything that he had to say, but the first thing that he talks about is that this defense has gotten bigger, it's gotten longer, and it's gotten faster. And he's talking about on the front end and the back end, the defense has gotten better that way. And so it looks like that he's super excited for that. Next, he talks about the personnel fit and really how this is going to fit for the vision that he has for this defense. And so I love to hear that it seems like the players that the Commanders have brought in really fit just the vision that he has for this defense, which is one of the reasons why I think that this defense is going to take off, because now you have that growth in the sense that you have added players that really fit what you wanted to do. We know, what Dan Quinn and him were able to do with the Dallas Cowboys defensively. And so the fact that you have more players that fit that vision, you have to be excited about that. And next, looking at Javon Kinlaw. So he's asked about him in the presser here. And he said that, look, he's a unique player. He's a player that you can move up and down the line to scrimmage. He talked about how good he was with his speed, his power, and his bend. And so it looks like that he's just talking about his versatility. And so he talks about him being difficult to block on the edge if they go to a 6 technique. And he also talked about that he's going to be difficult to guard inside against guards. And so very excited for Javon Kinlaw and his versatility. And we talked about this before a couple videos back, that I think that Javon Kinlaw really was starting to pick up speed last season with the Jets, even though many would say it wasn't a great season. But I think it's going to set him up for a great season in this defensive scheme. And so next, the next thing that he talks about here is just, he was talking about, who is the player that has really stood out and, has come into camp and has looked good and everything. And so he talks about Daron Payne. And so he talks about him being a guy that's really looked good. He's really been focused. And he talks about how he's leading by example. And I love it because there's one situation where I guess, he was telling the defense to go get after it or whatnot. And I guess Dan Quinn and him, he had to tell Dan Quinn and apologize because Daron Payne is out there just balling. And so he had to tell him to kind of tone it back a little bit, but just talking about his intensity, his focus. And so I thought that was fun to hear that he's had to tell him to scale back just a little bit because he's been so intense. And so I can't wait to see Daron Payne, how he's going to perform this year. He sounded very comfortable too in talking to the press there in the little clip that I saw with him. And so that is super exciting to see about Daron Payne. Next, he addresses Marshon Lattimore and not being there. And he said, look, there is communication with the team. And he said, obviously, we'll see what type of shape he is in once he gets back and reports. But the key here is that communication is happening between Marshon Lattimore and the team. And so that's good to see. And then next, when he's talking about the defense, he definitely feels like the defense collectively has gotten better and it is going to be able to take off on all levels. He feels like that the run defense will be better. He feels that the rush defense is also going to be better. And so that kind of goes into what he was talking about initially with the personnel fit and everything else, which is one of the reasons why I'm excited to see this team, even though they did not go out and add, a marquee pass rusher, so to speak. I think that you're going to see collectively from this unit, it's going to be a lot more together than it was last season. And so I do think that they are going to make some huge strides here. And so next, he talks about the rookie that has stood out, and that is Trey Amos. And so we talked about this on the last OTA edition where we were talking about him making plays and things like that, but he is talking about how focused he is. He was talking about the meetings and how really the rookies get some extra work because they get a chance to meet with the veterans, and then they come back, and then I guess they have a little bit of a development meeting in the evenings and things like that. But he's talking about Trey Amos is doing very well and seems to be ahead of the curve. And so, look, it seems like that Trey Amos is a steal for the Washington Commanders, and I certainly think he's going to be just a huge, huge impact for this team if he's able to come in and the things that he did in college really translate over, which it seems like it is, but we'll see what happens when the pads get put on. And so the next player that he talks about that really has had razor focus here is Quan Martin. And so, hearing about Quan Martin, it sounds like that he's been really focused, and he's a guy that they're super excited to see. And he even says that he feels like he can be one of the better safeties in the league. And so that is a huge vote of confidence here for Quan Martin. And so also Dan Quinn mentioned him, which we're going to talk about that in a moment. But Quan Martin is a guy that, look, he said he's super focused along with Daron Payne. And so that's great to see. And then lastly, another thing that he talks about too is Kane Medrano. And so he talks about Kane Medrano, and he's talking about him, and they're just trying to figure out what his role is going to be. Like, can he be a linebacker? Is he a guy that's a safety? And he said that that's something that they're going to find a little bit more about once they put the pads on. And so it was good to hear that, and just kind of the process and the thinking as far as getting players into the right fit and the right personnel groups and stuff like that on the defensive end. And so that was cool to see that from, Coach Joe Whitt, just talking about that. And then next, he talks about pressure and putting pressure on the quarterback, because he was asked about, is it more important to have edge pressure than it is to have the interior pressure? And he was like, no, I feel like that at the end of the day, it's a collective thing. And bottom line here is that you want to get the QB out of the pocket. You want to get his eyes in different places and things like that, to where you can go out there and you can make the play. And lastly, in talking about making the play in sacks and stuff like that, he said, look, nobody anticipated that Dante Fowler was going to come out and have the year that he had as far as sacks and stuff like that. But he does feel like that this defense has gotten better with the pass rush. And he's like, is it going to be an individual? I don't know. Is it going to be collective? We'll see what happens, but he does feel very confident with this defense as far as generating pass rush and getting home right now. And so that was great to see there from Joe Whitt. And so next, I wanted to go ahead and jump into what Dan Quinn had to say. And so with Dan Quinn, with him, I mean, it's always confidence that he is definitely instilling when he is talking to the media. But, one of the things he was talking about is just situational football. So it seems like that they were doing a little bit more of that with the drills and stuff like that. Talked about just how the strength and conditioning has been well for the team, and how the offense and the defense have been working together there. And then he was talking about looking at specialists on defense and stuff like that. And so, again, this kind of goes into a little bit of what Coach Joe Whitt Jr. was talking about when you're just trying to figure out, how you can put players in certain different situations and see how they're going to respond. And so I think that that's what you probably are going to see a lot of in OTAs, is just they're trying to figure that stuff out. And then lastly, he talked about Daron Payne and how he's been impressed with him. And so between him and Coach Joe Whitt Jr., they have been very excited about what they're seeing from Daron Payne. He also does mention Quan Martin and how he was able to really play through his injuries. And so he had 2 separated shoulders last season, if you did not get a chance to see that. And so it definitely seems like that Quan Martin, and then also to Daron Payne, these guys are poised to have some good seasons, because you have both coaches talking very highly about them. And so next, one of the other snippets that I got a chance to see here was Zach Ertz. And so Zach Ertz talking a little bit about Jayden Daniels, and really talking about how comfortable that he looks, how much command that he has over the offense, and just really the way that he's working and how guys really want to go play for him. And so Zach Ertz is really talking about enjoying the process, and he feels like that's really been the focus for this team, is just enjoying the process, and that guys have really been locked in. And so once again, just paraphrasing all this stuff, you can go out and you can look up these interviews for yourself, but that was great to see. And then he also talks about the versatility with the offense and being able to have different personnel groups, which I've talked about that before. I do think that this offense defense is going to be dangerous because they have so many different playmakers, and then they have so many ways that they can line up, window dressing, and everything like that, and they can simply attack a defense. And so I'm just looking forward to when we actually start playing some live ball here. And so next, another player that I got a chance to take a look at a quick snippet on was Josh Conerly Jr. And so he's a player that definitely exuberates confidence as well. And so one of the things that he was talking about is the communication continues to get better. So that was good to see. They do mention that he is working with the veteran linemen and or things like that on the sideline. So talking to some of the veteran players there and just trying to learn the in and outs that way. And so that's great to see that Josh Conerly Jr. has been a bit of a sponge. And then also, too, he just talks about being consistent and with a routine, because that's the biggest thing coming into the professionals, because there's not anybody that is going to wake you up to do so. Like, you have got to have that the initiative to do it. And you've also got to lock into a routine and be consistent. And so that's something that has been talked about with Jayden Daniels. And so that lets you know just, from a player standpoint, what you are getting from Josh Conerly Jr. this early in his career. And so some great key takeaways from that. It sounds like that, look, man, we are definitely trending in the right direction. Some of the other notes and key takeaways from this is that Mikey Sainristil and Deebo Samuel, they did some extra work after practice. And so that's good to see with Mikey Sainristil and Deebo Samuel putting in some extra work. Again, Jayden Daniels looking like that, or it sounds like he's pretty comfortable out there and doing his thing. And then also, too, it seems like Quan Martin and then Deron Payne have looked very good and staying focused and leading this group. And then it sounds like that Zach Ertz, man, is just happy to be back. It sounds like he's locked in. And he says that the team really is not focused on what they did last season. They're not focusing on the outside noise, which is some of the things that we've talked about here on the show, because this team is in the spotlight. I mean, you got some primetime games and things like that. And so we know that with the Commanders and the fact that they're approaching the season already like they are, it definitely seems like that they're going to be in a good situation here. And then I love what we got a chance to hear from Joe Whitt Jr. It just sounds like that he is super excited for this defense. I can't wait to see from just the versatility what he's going to do with this defense, because I think that a lot of people are going to be surprised with this defense. And I think that rightfully so, because I think that there's so much written, outside of the Commanders, just nationally, just people not believing in this defense. But I really do believe with the pieces that you have, when you have the fit that fits what kind of scheme you want to run, I think that you're ultimately going to have a better season than what you had a season ago. And I think that just the free agent additions that we have on defense, I feel like have been underrated. And I think that I cannot wait to see these guys when they get a chance to actually get to the games and things like that. But I know we still have to get the preseason and all that. But it was just good to see that vote of confidence here from Joe Whitt Jr. And so lastly, you guys let me know in the comments here what you guys are thinking about all this with the OTAs. We did get a chance to hear that they are going to be practicing with the Ravens and the Patriots. So that's going to be something that leads up to the preseason games that the Washington Commanders have with both of those teams. But anyhow, you let me know what you guys are thinking as far as the key takeaways from the OTAs. We'll be back talking a little bit more Washington Commanders. And so, as we always say, look, go Commanders, and I will see you on the next one. All right, peace.